A boy stepped outside on a quiet October evening, heading to a nearby convenience store with his brother and best friend. It was a routine trip in the small, close-knit town of St. Joseph, Minnesota, a place where parents felt safe letting their children roam. But that day, something unimaginable happened. He vanished without a trace. As panic swept through the town, search efforts began immediately. Hundreds of volunteers and law enforcement officers united, scouring every wooded area, every back road, and every hidden corner, determined to find the missing boy. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but there was no sign of him. The disappearance left his family devastated and the community grasping for answers. For 27 years, the case remained unsolved, a haunting mystery etched into the hearts of those who remembered. Then, in 2016, a stunning confession brought the truth to light, revealing what happened that fateful day. This is the story of Jacob Wetterling. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries that shaped history. Jacob Wetterling was 11 years old, a boy full of life and curiosity, living in the small town of St. Joseph, Minnesota. Known for his bright smile and kind heart, Jacob was an active, happy child who enjoyed spending time outdoors, playing sports, and riding his bike through the quiet streets of his hometown. Jacob had a strong bond with his family. His parents, Jerry and Patty Wetterling, were deeply involved in the community, raising their 4 children in an environment built on love and togetherness. Jacob was especially close to his younger brother Trevor, who looked up to him not only as a sibling but as a role model and best friend. The 2 brothers often spent their time exploring the neighborhood, playing games, and sharing the innocent joys of childhood. St. Joseph in the 1980s was a picture of small-town America, a place where neighbors greeted each other warmly, and parents felt at ease letting their children roam freely. Surrounded by farmland and quiet roads, the town offered a sense of security and calm. It was the kind of place where doors were left unlocked, and children grew up believing the world was safe and good. Jacob's days were filled with school, friends, and his love for sports. He was a talented athlete who played soccer and dreamed of becoming a professional player someday. Friends described him as funny, caring, and always eager to make others laugh. He had a playful spirit, often seen joking with his siblings or helping out around the house. The Wetterling family's home was filled with laughter, music, and shared meals, creating a warm and nurturing environment. Patty, a dedicated mother, was actively involved in her children's lives, ensuring they had the support and encouragement to pursue their interests. Jerry, a gentle and loving father, worked tirelessly to provide for the family while instilling a strong sense of values and compassion in his children. Sunday, October 22, 1989, began like any other autumn evening in St. Joseph, Minnesota. After dinner, Jacob Wetterling, his younger brother Trevor, and their friend Aaron Larson decided to head to the Tom Thumb convenience store, just a short bike ride away, to rent a video for the night. The boys, eager for an adventure, set out together, their laughter echoing in the crisp evening air. The 3 boys made their way to the store without incident, chatting and joking as they pedaled along the quiet roads. The trip to Tom Thumb was a familiar routine for them, and the small-town streets felt safe under the dim glow of streetlights. After renting a video, they began the ride home, sticking close together as the evening grew darker. The route took them along a familiar stretch of road, a mix of open fields and scattered houses. Suddenly, as they approached a driveway, a masked man appeared from the shadows. Dressed in dark clothing and wearing a stocking cap mask, the figure stepped into their path, stopping them in their tracks. Armed with a revolver, the man ordered the boys to throw their bikes into the ditch and lie face down on the ground. His voice was calm but commanding, leaving the boys frozen with fear. The man demanded to know their ages, one by one. When Trevor identified himself as the youngest, he was told to get up and run into the woods nearby. The stranger warned him not to look back, threatening that he would shoot if he disobeyed. Trevor obeyed, sprinting into the darkness, his heart racing. The masked man then turned his attention to Jacob and Aaron, demanding they show their faces. After a brief pause, he ordered Aaron to run as well, repeating the same chilling threat. Aaron hesitated but eventually fled, leaving Jacob alone with the man. That was the last time Jacob was seen alive by anyone other than his captor. Trevor and Aaron regrouped and ran home, their minds racing with fear and confusion. They told Jacob's parents what had happened, describing the masked man and the terrifying encounter. Patty and Jerry Wetterling immediately called the police, setting off a chain of events that would shake their community to its core. Within hours, law enforcement arrived at the scene. Officers secured the area and began an initial search, but there were no immediate signs of Jacob or the man who had taken him. A sense of urgency spread as word of the abduction reached neighbors and local residents. By morning, search teams had mobilized, and the small town was transformed into the center of a massive manhunt. Search parties scoured the area, combing through fields, wooded paths, and nearby roads. Volunteers worked tirelessly alongside law enforcement, calling Jacob's name into the night, hoping for a response that never came. The Wetterling family's home became a hub for search coordination. Neighbors brought food, supplies, and their unwavering support. Helicopters circled overhead, search dogs sniffed through dense brush, and media outlets descended on St. Joseph, broadcasting the story across the nation. Despite these efforts, days turned into nights with no new leads. Investigators questioned nearby residents, seeking anyone who might have seen something unusual. A composite sketch of the masked man began circulating, but the lack of solid evidence left the case shrouded in uncertainty. The quiet streets of St. Joseph were now filled with the hum of activity, search teams, police radios, and the murmur of worried voices. What once felt like a safe haven now carried the weight of fear and unanswered questions. The abduction sent shockwaves through the community, leaving families fearful and children suddenly cautious in a way they had never been before. Porch lights were left on at night, a silent vigil for Jacob's safe return. As detectives analyzed the circumstances of Jacob's abduction, a troubling connection emerged. 9 months earlier, in January 1989, a 12-year-old boy named Jared Skirrell had been abducted in Cold Spring, just 10 miles away. Jared recounted how a man driving a dark car stopped him, forced him into the vehicle, and subjected him to a terrifying ordeal before releasing him with a chilling warning to run and not look back. Investigators noted striking similarities between Jared's experience and the events leading up to Jacob's disappearance. Both cases involved young boys, taken from quiet neighborhoods in rural Minnesota. In both instances, the perpetrator used a vehicle and threats of violence to exert control. The parallels couldn't be ignored. In addition to Jared's case, law enforcement began revisiting a series of assaults that had occurred in Painesville between 1986 and 1987. During this period, 5 teenage boys reported being attacked by a man who ambushed them at night. The assaults were aggressive and terrifying, leaving the victims traumatized. At the time, no suspects had been identified, and the incidents were largely forgotten until Jacob's disappearance brought them back into focus. Investigators pored over the details of these cases, interviewing past victims and their families. While descriptions of the assailant varied, the pattern of behavior was unmistakable: a lone predator targeting boys in isolated areas, using threats to ensure compliance and escape undetected. The emerging pattern suggested a connection, but without definitive evidence, investigators were left chasing shadows. Leads came in by the hundreds, yet none provided the breakthrough they so desperately needed. Detectives also turned their attention to the area surrounding St. Joseph. Searches focused on wooded regions, isolated roads, and abandoned buildings. Helicopters and K-9 units were deployed to cover as much ground as possible. Despite these efforts, Jacob's trail seemed to vanish within minutes of his abduction, leaving investigators with little to work on beyond the accounts of Trevor and Aaron. The investigation was further complicated by the limitations of forensic technology in the late 1980s. DNA testing, still in its infancy, could not yet be widely applied to cases like Jared's. Physical evidence, such as tire tracks and fibers, was collected wherever possible, but much of it was inconclusive. Despite the challenges, the community and investigators remained steadfast. Searches continued for months, and the Wetterling family made heartfelt pleas to keep Jacob's story in the public eye. But as the weeks turned into months, and the months into years, the case grew colder. The lack of progress left St. Joseph on edge. Parents kept their children closer, curfews were enforced, and the once peaceful town became a place of unease. The possibility of a predator operating in their midst shook the community to its core. Amid the growing uncertainty, detectives revisited the list of potential suspects. Among them was Danny Heinrich, a man who had lived in Painesville during the assaults. Heinrich had been questioned early in the investigation due to his presence in the area and similarities to victim descriptions. Despite these suspicions, no physical evidence tied him to Jacob, and Heinrich's name eventually faded into the background. With no arrests and no solid leads, the investigation stalled. But the questions remained: was there a link between Jacob, Jared, and the Painesville attacks? And if so, who was responsible for these chilling crimes? By the early 1990s, the case was at a standstill. Law enforcement, determined to keep Jacob's memory alive, encouraged the public to come forward with any new information. The Wetterling family's advocacy for children's safety kept the case in the national spotlight, but behind the scenes, investigators struggled to find the missing pieces that would bring Jacob home. The investigation had uncovered connections, patterns, and suspects, but the most critical answers remained just out of reach. For the Wetterlings, and for the community of St. Joseph, the search for Jacob was far from over. Jacob Wetterling's disappearance cast a shadow over St. Joseph, one that lingered for nearly 3 decades. For 27 years, his case remained unsolved, leaving his family to navigate a painful journey marked by hope, heartbreak, and relentless advocacy. In the days following Jacob's abduction, his parents, Jerry and Patty Wetterling, vowed to channel their grief into action. With the case growing colder, they turned their attention toward preventing similar tragedies. 4 months after Jacob vanished, they established the Jacob Wetterling Foundation. Its mission was clear: to promote child safety and prevent abductions. The foundation quickly became a beacon of hope for families across the nation. Patty Wetterling emerged as a leading voice in the fight to protect children, speaking to schools, community groups, and lawmakers about the importance of education and awareness. She urged parents to have open conversations with their children about safety and strangers, using Jacob's story to drive home the urgency of her message. Patty's determination resonated far beyond Minnesota. Her advocacy played a pivotal role in the creation of the Jacob Wetterling Crimes Against Children and Sexually Violent Offender Registration Act, passed in 1994. This federal law required states to implement registries for sex offenders, marking a turning point in efforts to safeguard children nationwide. Despite these strides, the personal toll on the Wetterling family was profound. The absence of closure left them in a constant state of uncertainty. Jacob's siblings grew up under the weight of their brother's disappearance, navigating their own grief while watching their parents pour themselves into advocacy work. The family's home became a hub of activity, with calls, meetings, and media inquiries serving as constant reminders of the tragedy. The passing years brought new challenges. Tips continued to trickle in, but none provided the answers they desperately sought. False leads and hoaxes added to the pain, as the hope of a breakthrough was repeatedly dashed. Each passing anniversary marked another year without Jacob, a reminder of time lost and questions unanswered. For the Wetterlings, hope was both a comfort and a burden. They clung to the belief that Jacob might still be alive, even as the reality of the situation grew harder to ignore. Their resilience inspired a community that refused to forget Jacob, keeping porch lights on as a symbol of their collective hope. As the years turned into decades, St. Joseph transformed. Children who had once played alongside Jacob grew up and started families of their own. Yet, Jacob's memory endured. Missing posters became weathered and faded, but his story remained a fixture in the hearts of those who had lived through that fateful October night. Patty Wetterling often reflected on the balance between her public role as an advocate and her private grief as a mother. She spoke candidly about the challenges of staying strong for her family while leading a national movement. Despite the weight she carried, Patty's resolve never wavered. Her focus remained on ensuring that no other family would endure the pain her own had faced. The Jacob Wetterling Foundation evolved over time, becoming the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. Its mission expanded to include education on child abuse prevention, internet safety, and support for families affected by abductions. The center became a lasting tribute to Jacob's legacy, a reminder of the change that can emerge from tragedy. In the fall of 2015, a cold case that had haunted Minnesota for over 25 years took an unexpected turn. A single piece of evidence, preserved for decades, would bring investigators closer to uncovering the truth behind Jacob Wetterling's disappearance. The pivotal moment came when advancements in DNA technology allowed law enforcement to revisit evidence from Jared Skierl's 1989 abduction and assault. The DNA profile obtained from that case matched Danny Heinrich, a man with a known history of suspicious behavior in the Paynesville area. The DNA evidence provided investigators with the break they had been waiting for. While the statute of limitations had long expired for Jared's case, the connection to Heinrich opened the door to a broader investigation. A search warrant was executed at Heinrich's home in Annandale, uncovering hundreds of images of child pornography. Alongside these materials, investigators found items that reignited suspicions about his involvement in Jacob's disappearance. While none of the evidence directly tied Heinrich to Jacob, the collection painted a damning picture of a man capable of unspeakable acts. Heinrich was arrested on charges of possessing child pornography, a move that ensured he would remain in custody while investigators pursued further connections to Jacob's case. The arrest allowed law enforcement to intensify their focus on Heinrich's movements and potential ties to other cases in the region. Detectives revisited the Painesville incidents, Jared's assault, and Jacob's abduction, seeking overlaps in behavior and geography. They pieced together a timeline that placed Heinrich in proximity to all three. As investigators connected the dots, they built a more comprehensive profile of Heinrich. Decades of evasion had come to an end, and the possibility of answers for Jacob Wetterling's family felt closer than ever. While Heinrich denied involvement in Jacob's case, the weight of evidence against him, combined with the DNA match to Jared, created pressure. Law enforcement pursued every lead, reanalyzing old evidence and interviewing witnesses who might provide additional context. The pieces were falling into place. For the first time in years, the investigation had momentum, and Heinrich's name was back in the spotlight. The spotlight on Heinrich also revived fears within the community. St. Joseph residents, many of whom had lived with the trauma of Jacob's disappearance, began to wonder if the answers they had long sought were finally within reach. News outlets speculated about Heinrich's potential involvement, and public interest of the Wetterling family at advocacy events. Although the child pornography charges carried significant weight, the ultimate goal remained uncovering Jacob's fate. Investigators worked tirelessly, knowing they were closer than ever to finding the truth. The months following Heinrich's arrest were marked by quiet determination. Behind the scenes, negotiations were underway that would ultimately lead to a plea agreement, one that promised answers to the questions that had lingered for over 2 decades. In September 2016, inside a Minnesota courtroom, Danny Heinrich broke his silence. For the first time, he revealed in chilling detail what had happened to Jacob Wetterling on the night of October 22, 1989. Heinrich described how he had been driving through St. Joseph, looking for someone to target. Armed with a revolver and wearing a stocking cap, he came across Jacob, Trevor, and Aaron riding their bikes along a rural road. He stopped the boys, ordered them off their bikes, and made them lie face down. After questioning their ages, Heinrich forced Jacob into his car while threatening the other two to run and not look back. Heinrich drove Jacob to a secluded location near Painesville. There, he assaulted the boy. When Jacob began crying and asking to go home, Heinrich made a fateful decision. He retrieved his revolver and shot Jacob once in the head, ending his life. He buried the body in a shallow grave before driving away. 1 year later, Heinrich returned to the burial site. Fearing the remains might be discovered, he moved Jacob's body to a more concealed spot nearby. He described noticing Jacob's red jacket becoming exposed and carefully burying the remains deeper to avoid detection. The confession also revealed how Heinrich had used a police scanner that night to monitor law enforcement activity. This allowed him to stay ahead of search efforts and evade capture. For the Wetterling family, Heinrich's confession provided long-awaited answers, but the details were almost too horrific to bear. After 27 years of unanswered questions, the truth about Jacob's final moments came to light, leaving those in the courtroom stunned. Despite the devastating admission, Heinrich's plea agreement ensured he would not face charges for Jacob's abduction and murder. Instead, he pleaded guilty to a single count of child pornography possession, a decision that sparked widespread debate. Judge John Tunheim sentenced Heinrich to the maximum penalty of 20 years in federal prison for the child pornography charges. During the sentencing, the judge acknowledged the gravity of Heinrich's crimes and the profound impact they had on countless lives. During sentencing, Judge Tunheim addressed Heinrich directly, stating, "This is not just about child pornography. It is also about changing the lives of so many children and parents, who prayed for Jacob's return, and also feared you coming out of the dark." Heinrich's sentence, though unrelated to Jacob's murder, provided some measure of justice. The agreement ensured that he would remain incarcerated for years, with the possibility of civil commitment as a sexual predator upon his release, preventing him from ever walking free. One of the most significant outcomes of the Wetterling's advocacy was the passage of the Jacob-Wetterling Act in 1994, the first federal law to establish sex offender registries in the United States. The act required states to create systems for tracking individuals convicted of sexually violent offenses, ensuring that communities could be informed and better equipped to prevent future crimes. This legislation became a cornerstone in the fight to protect children and was later strengthened by amendments like Megan's Law in 1996 and the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act in 2006. While the law created lasting change, the Wetterling family's efforts extended beyond policy. Patty Wetterling emerged as a national figure in child advocacy, traveling across the country to speak about Jacob's story and the importance of safeguarding children. Her compassion and determination inspired countless families and communities to join the cause. The impact of Jacob's story reached far beyond legislation. Communities across the nation adopted new practices to protect children, from safety education programs in schools to neighborhood watch initiatives. The simple act of leaving porch lights on became a symbol of hope, a way to honor Jacob and remind the world of the importance of vigilance. In Jacob's hometown of St. Joseph, his memory is preserved in both tangible and intangible ways. The Bridge of Hope, which spans the Mississippi River near St. Cloud, serves as a tribute to his life and the legacy of change his story inspired. Residents of St. Joseph continue to gather for events that celebrate Jacob's life and advocate for a safer future. The Wetterling family's determination to turn their personal tragedy into a force for good ensured that Jacob's story would never be forgotten. The Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, renamed from the original foundation, continues to educate families and support efforts to prevent child exploitation and abduction. Patty Wetterling's journey, from a grieving mother to a national advocate, remains a powerful example of how individuals can spark meaningful change. Her message of hope and perseverance resonates with families who have faced similar tragedies, offering them guidance and strength. Let us honor Jacob's memory by making the world safer for all children. Stay watchful. Stay informed. And never forget the impact that one community can have when united in a common purpose. Thank you for watching. If Jacob's story moved you, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that must be told. Together, we can ensure that Jacob's legacy continues to inspire and protect.